Today's a big day because today I'll be covering what's new in GIMP 2.99.18. As always, you can download the latest development release version of GIMP here on the development downloads page. So once you open GIMP 2.99.18 for the first time, you're going to see the first new feature, and that is going to be the brand new welcome dialog. So this dialog is just trying to make the user experience easier and more consistent with other software by providing some important options here right off the bat. So first off, it's going to tell you which version of GIMP you have installed, and then it's going to give you some useful links here in order to help you learn GIMP or contribute or donate to GIMP. I do think the user interface here, the user experience needs to be improved a little bit. For example, making the title here bolder and making these little titles, subtitles here stand out a little better. I have already told GIMP. They said they're going to implement those changes or at least take that into consideration. All of that is to say, while this may not look perfect right now, they are working on the appearance. So up top here, you have several tabs. It starts off on the Welcome tab, and then the second tab here is the Personalize tab. I think this one is the most important because it allows you to customize the look and feel of GIMP. So for starters here, you have the theme option, and you'll see here it says color scheme, and you can select whether you want light, middle gray, or dark colors throughout the UI. So let's see what light looks like, middle gray, and dark. And you can also change the icon theme. So right now it's set to default, which is the symbolic option. If I set it to color, now we get the color icons, and legacy will give you what the old icons used to look like. I do feel like they could scale these icons up a little bit and they would look nicer because I do actually like the way these look. They're just a little small for me. So let's go back to default. Speaking of icon size, you can scale the icon here under icon scaling. So make sure override icon sizes set by the theme is checked. By default, it's set to large. You can go as big as huge. And I have received feedback from other users saying that huge isn't actually that huge on a 4K monitor. I don't know if it's fixed in this particular version, but I do feel like GIMP could introduce some even larger versions of the icons for 4K monitors. But you can also come down here to medium or small if you want. Maybe you want the icons to be out of the way because you're working, so you want them as small as possible. Let's go over here to large. That's what I usually keep this set to. And I think most importantly, you can now change the font scaling throughout the UI. So right now I have this set a little above 100. A lot of people complain about the font size just being way too small throughout the UI, especially people who don't have the best vision. So this allows you to just drag the slider and you can increase the font size to as high as 200%. I would think this will be super useful for people with 4K monitors once again, but also anybody who just needs to be able to see the text more easily throughout the UI. So I do have a tutorial on how to do this for GIMP 2.10. It requires many steps. It requires changing some of the code inside some of the documents in the back end of GIMP. Basically, it's a pain in the ass. This is way better. So it's good to see this here on the welcome screen or the welcome dialog in GIMP 2.99.18. So I will just keep this size a little bit larger so that it makes other features easier to see as I do this tutorial. One little piece of feedback, I do wish that this had a manual input option so I could click on this and manually type in a percentage value or like a box down here. Because if I wanted this set to 110, I kind of have to click and drag it in real time and then things are changing around me. So it's causing the position of things to move and basically it's just a little hard to get it to an exact value with the slider as it's making all those changes. So maybe have a editable text box where I can manually type a value. So you also see that there is now a drop down to change the GUI language. So some people's computers don't automatically recognize the language of the computer and then add it to GIMP. So in other words, if French is your native language on your computer, it may not transfer over to GIMP, so GIMP may still be in English. If you're not a native English speaker, this may not be what you want. So this allows you to just manually set the language of GIMP here from directly within the welcome window. You also have additional customizations, including the checked merge menu and title bar option. So that is going to be this up here, this user interface feature. So the original setup for this was you had two separate bars. You had your title bar and you had your menu bar. The title bar was at the very top, and then below that you would have the menu bar. And it just took up a lot of space and it made the software look antiquated. A lot of new software now just has the single bar, as you can see here, with all the features merged into one. I personally think this simplifies things. It makes it look a lot better. I ran a poll on my YouTube channel and most of you agreed that you think that this looks better with the one single bar. So now GIMP has this implemented as the default look, but if you don't like that, you can uncheck this option. You then have to close down GIMP and reopen it, and that's gonna bring you back to the 2-bar setup. But I'll keep this checked. Next to that, you have enabled check for updates, and when this is toggled on, GIMP is going to automatically check online for any new versions of GIMP. If new versions are available, it'll let you know. It'll then link you to where you can download the latest version, update GIMP, then you'll have the latest version at all times. Very useful feature, but if you don't want this connected to the internet, just toggle that off. You also have use tool groups now on here. So by default, GIMP has all the tools inside of tool groups. Some people find that confusing. They don't like having to dive into each tool group to find where the tool is that they need. So when you have this toggled off, that's going to take all of the tools out of the tool group, and now you can just find every single tool here and click on the one you need. So let me just toggle this back on. I prefer tool groups toggled on. The next tab here is the Contribute tab if you want to report bugs, so anything that breaks while you're testing out this new version of GIMP, and lots of things probably will break because it is a development release version and there's a lot of big new features in here. You can report those bugs, or you can write code for GIMP, you can translate GIMP into different languages, or you can donate lots of money to GIMP. So over here in the Create tab, and this is another important tab here in the welcome dialog, because from here you can create a new image or a new composition by clicking Create. You can open an existing image from your computer, or you can select recent images from your document history and open these selected images. So yes, you can, for example, hold the Shift key and select multiple images and open all of those simultaneously. So that is a quick way to get started. I don't know if this is the right setup for this or if this is the right location, because so many beginners, when they first open up a program, do just want to get right into opening a new image. So I don't know if this should maybe be on the first tab or if this should be set up a little better so it's easier to know that this is where you go to create a new document. However, I do really like having this new feature. Finally, on the last tab, you have the release notes for this latest version, so GIMP 2.99.18. Inside of the release notes, you have all the notable new features, but as I've mentioned in a previous tutorial, you also have this little play button, and it's going to play a little animation showing you exactly where inside of GIMP this latest feature resides. So if I click this little plus icon, it's hard to see, but this little icon here is going to flash showing you where non-destructive editing is. So I'll do that again so you guys can see it. There's a little flash happening there. Also, if I click the play icon here for the new paint tool feature that now allows you to expand layers as you paint, which I'll show you a little later on. When I click that little play icon, it automatically takes me to the paintbrush tool, and then it shows a little highlight over this new area where that new feature is. So I'll click that again to show. So feel free to play around with that. You can also see a little bit of the spark notes, as we would call them here in America. That's just basically like the important things you need to know about what comes out in this latest release, all listed here in a bulleted list. So oddly enough, when you click Learn More, it just takes you to the GIMP homepage. I think it should take you to the news release or the press release of this latest release version. But let's come over here back to Create, and what I'll do is just open these 3 images up for this tutorial. So I'll click Open Selected Images. Okay, so my compositions are opened up here, but let's come over to an unedited image. So the feature you guys have all been waiting for is non-destructive editing, and yes, it is here in 2.99.18. It has snuck its way into the feature freeze for GIMP 3.0, which means it will be in GIMP 3.0, at least in its first iteration. It's a little bit primitive right now. However, it works great in my opinion with a couple bugs. So with non-destructive editing, what you can do is you can add edits to your image the way you always could, except now it's non-destructive, which means it's not going to be merged into the pixels for the image layer. It's going to be separated on its own little layer effect, and you can go back at any time and you can edit that layer effect. So let's show it in action. So here on this image, let's go to Colors, Curves, and I'm going to edit my curves the way I always would. So let's just do a quick little edit here, add a little contrast. And let's say we're super happy with that, so we come over here and click OK, and it applies curves to our image. Well, the exciting new part of this, which we've all been waiting for years, is that now you get these little eyeglasses icon, maybe we'll call them spectacles, and I don't love this icon, but when you click on the little spectacles icon, now you're going to get this little layer effects user interface, and you'll see here we have the curves effect we just applied to our image. And because this is now non-destructive, what I can do is I can show or hide this effect by clicking the show hide icon, and I can even edit this effect by double clicking on here. And that's going to bring up that curves dialog once again with the last settings that I had on here. So now let's come over to the channel and change this to red, for example. And we'll just tweak this after the fact. So just tweak the red channel of the image, click OK. And now it is reapplied to our image here, and I can at any time remove this effect if I want to by clicking remove the selected filter. I can even merge it down to the original image layer, which is what used to happen by default. So if I wanted this to not be its own layer effect thing on here, I can merge it down. And if I have multiple effects on the single image, I can rearrange those effects in the stacking order. So yes, you can have multiple layer effects on a single layer or image. So for example, if I go to Colors, and let's go Saturation this time, and just increase the saturation, and click OK. And that is way too saturated, but we're just demonstrating here. So if I come over here and click on this little effects icon, once again, we'll now have both of our effects on here. So yes, you can have multiple layer effects. And if I rearrange these in the stacking order, sometimes you get slightly different looks depending on which effects you use. So sometimes the layer stacking order or the effect stacking order does matter. Sometimes it doesn't. And then if at any time I wanted to erase this, I can come over here and remove that filter. Now that filter is gone. So I could do a bunch of other things and come back to this at any time and edit the effects. That's what's so great about non-destructive editing. That's why people have been waiting so long for this. But now it is officially here, and I am super excited. The other cool thing about this, let me just navigate here over to my other composition, is the non-destructive layer effects situation doesn't just apply to images. You can also use it for text. So for example, I've got text right here. Let me come over to the layer group where this resides. And this layer here, the text layer, has an effect on it. Let me hold Control and zoom in with my mouse wheel. So that effect is going to be the drop shadow effect. So if I were to click on the little spectacles icon here, you'll see it says drop shadow. I can show or hide that. And I can also double click on here and I can edit the settings of this effect. So amazing. And click OK. Now the updates apply to this effect. So I can go back at any time. And the other great thing about this is that these layer effects do save with XCF files. So if I were to save my composition, close this down, come and revisit this like a week later, all of my effects would still be there. I can go in and edit them at any time. And so really it saves a lot of time, and it allows for a lot more flexibility when it comes to making adjustments to your work. And one other thing that I think applies to this that I haven't tested yet, I can click on this, and let's say I wanted to change this to just the word Fox. Yes, that is beautiful. So you can go in at any time and you can change the actual text on here with the effects still applied, and it's going to still have the effects on the text. But you can come in here and edit the text, add new text, whatever. That should make it easier to create templates and other things like that in the future. Another amazing new feature in GIMP 2.99.18 is going to be the implementation of smart guides, essentially. They're calling it dynamic guides. So with this feature, what you can do is you can rearrange things on the canvas and in real time see a guide that helps you align different objects to each other. So let me come over here, grab the Move tool to enable this feature, come over here to View, and you'll now see an option called Snap to Bounding Boxes. So I'll click that option, and what this is going to do is it's going to align the bounding box for the current layer you have selected to whatever is the next bounding box. So in this case, it's going to be this text here. So if I click on this paragraph of text, you can see what the bounding box looks like for this. So let me grab the Foxes Love to Nap text, and when I click and drag, you'll see now you're going to get this little smart guide, and you'll see it aligns to that left side as I drag to the left. As I drag it towards the center, you'll see it aligns to the center there, and if I drag it to the right, it will align to the right portion there of that bounding box. And it also works if I bring it down here. So let me just hold Control and use my mouse wheel to zoom out slightly. So you'll see there, the bottom of my title's bounding box is aligning to the center of this bounding box. And I can also align the two centers right there. So you can see how that works. And as I get to the bottom of the text bounding box, it aligns to that as well. So that is a great way to align objects directly on your canvas without having to click a bunch of buttons or change your tools or do any of that stuff. But wait, there's more. So not only do we have dynamic guides when it comes to aligning based on bounding boxes, you also have dynamic guides when it comes to evenly distributing objects on a canvas. So in this other composition I have open, I have 3 different layers. They are all ellipse layers, ellipse shapes, and you'll see that the bounding boxes for each one of these shapes hugs to the shape itself. And in newer development release versions and in GIMP 3.0, because you can hold the Shift key and select multiple layers simultaneously, you can have all of the bounding boxes hug the contents of the layers by going to Layer, Crop Layers to Content, so you can crop all of the layers simultaneously to the shape that's inside each layer. So that's going to save you some time there. But let's check out that new feature. So if I go to View, Snap to Equidistance, now what I can do is I can space these 2 objects apart, and then now let's say we want this third object to have the same spacing when compared to the second object. So what I can do is just click and drag the third object, and as I drag it out, once it hits that same spacing as the first 2 objects, we're going to get that dynamic guide there, and then we also get the value of the spacing. So it's 263 pixels. So that's going to allow us to quickly space or distribute everything on the canvas without having to go into the alignment tool. So that's just another time saver and a really awesome new feature. GIMP 2.99.18 now rolls out with a cool feature called auto expanding layers. So with this feature, when you use the paintbrush tool, the layer will automatically expand as you paint outside of the layer boundary. So let's show this feature in action by grabbing the paintbrush tool, and let me just select ellipse 3, which is the blue ellipse. So inside of the tool options for the paintbrush tool, you'll see a new checkbox here called Expand Layers. You'll remember we saw it in the little animation inside the welcome dialog. So when I have Expand Layers checked, you can change the amount that the layer expands by. So right now it's set to 100 pixels. And then you can change whether or not there's a background color as it expands. So if I click on this, you have the color options. I'll just stick with transparency. That means that as the boundary of this expands, it'll just have transparency as the background. You'll also see here that if I have a layer mask associated with the layer I'm painting on, you can choose what happens to that layer mask as the layer expands. So you could fill the layer mask with white, or you could fill it with black. We don't have a layer mask right now, so we're not going to worry about that. But let me just test this out. So you'll see as I paint on the layer, I'm still inside the bounding box, so nothing's happening. But once I go outside the bounding box, it's going to automatically resize, and it'll resize it in increments of 100 pixels. So that's a really cool feature. This also works on the background, except it looks like it doesn't work at first. Let me hit Control Z. The reason for that is for this to work with the background, you have to go to View, Show All. And now as you paint on the background, it'll expand the background layer. One thing I want to note is that it's not actually expanding the canvas. You can see we still have this red dotted line denoting the canvas. So that will remain the same size, but the background layer itself will actually expand. And if you wanted to keep this situation the way it was, but you wanted to reposition the background layer inside the canvas frame, hit the M key to grab the move tool, and then you can just reposition that background. Now it's, situated a little bit differently here inside of the canvas frame. So let me hit Control Z to back up and go to View, Show All to turn that off. And that is that cool new feature in action. GIMP 2.99.18 now comes with improved color handling. This is thanks to some core development work that GIMP's contributors did over basically a period of several years. Very tedious work as I understand it. So I'm going to read from this because I'm not a developer, but GIMP's developers simplified the core code for handling color spaces, thus reducing the need for color conversions and improving GIMP's ability to preserve color information and precision on an image. So this should benefit you, the end user, in GIMP by making colors more accurate and precise as you continue to work in GIMP using various compositions like photos, when you're doing your photo editing, or when you're creating graphic designs. But it'll also allow GIMP to support CMYK going forward. It should do a better job of having more accurate CMYK implementation. Plus, it's just going to allow GIMP to handle various CMYK implementations as new code gets added to support that color space that everybody's clamoring for. So a couple of other quick things to note here. GIMP has improved font handling with 2.99.18. So now whenever a user tries to upload duplicate fonts, so let's say you have two different fonts but they have the same name, instead of GIMP just replacing the other one or adding a weird symbol next to the second font that you uploaded, now GIMP is just going to have both fonts listed there with the same name. This should improve the user experience. So what I'm talking about is here inside the font tool, you'll see a list of fonts here. So it's now just going to list those fonts with the same name instead of having a weird symbol next to it. Also, GIMP has expanded file formats that it supports while also improving existing file formats. So one example of that is that PDF files, if they have a layer group, it's now going to recognize the sub-layers inside that layer group when you go to, for example, export a PDF as multiple pages. Before, it would not recognize those layers inside the font group. It would basically just smush all the layers into a single layer and export that as a single page when exporting multi-page PDFs. If you're interested to learn all of the updates they've made to existing file formats and all of the new file formats that have been added to GIMP, I recommend that you check out GIMP 2.99.18's news release. All right, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you're as excited about GIMP 3.0 as I am, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.